Malnutrition. Key facts. Malnutrition in all its forms includes undernutrition, wasting, stunning, underweight, inadequate vitamins or minerals, overweight, obesity, and resulting diet-related non-communicable disease. 1.9 billion adults are overweight or obese, while 462 million are underweight. Globally, in 2020, 149 million children under 5 were estimated to be stunted, too short for age. 45 million were estimated to be weighted, too thin for height, and 38.9 million were overweight or obese. Around 45% of deaths among children under 5 years of age are linked to undernutrition. This mostly occurs in low and middle income countries. At the same time, in these same countries, rates of childhood overweight and obesity are rising. The developmental, economic, social, and medical impacts of the global burden of malnutrition are serious and lasting for individuals and their families, for communities, and for countries. Malnutrition refers to deficiencies, excesses, or imbalance in the person intake of energies and/or nutrients. The term malnutrition addresses three broad groups of conditions. Undernutrition, which include wasting, low weight for height, stunning, low height for age, and underweight, low weight for age. Micronutrition, related malnutrition which includes micronutrient deficiencies or lack of important vitamins and minerals, or micronutrients excess and overweight, obesity, and diet-related non-communicable disease such as heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and some cancers. Various forms of malnutrition. Undernutrition. There's a four broad subforms of undernutrition: wasting, stunning, underweight, and deficiencies in vitamins and minerals. Undernutrition makes children in particular much more vulnerable to disease and death. Low weight for height is known as wasting. It usually indicates recent and severe weight loss because a person has not had enough food to eat and/or they have had an infectious disease such as diarrhea, which has caused them to lose weight. A young child who is moderately or severely wasted has an increased risk of death, but treatment is possible. Low height for age is known as stunning. This is the result of chronic or recurrent undernutrition, usually associated with poor socio-economic conditions, poor maternal health and nutrition, frequent illness and/or inappropriate infant and young child feeding and care in early life. Stunning holds children back from reaching their physical and cognitive potential. Children with low weight for age are known as underweight. A child who is underweight may be stunted, wasted, or both. Micronutrient-related malnutrition. Inadequacies in intake of vitamins and minerals, often referred to as micronutrients, can also be grouped together. Micronutrients enable the body to produce enzymes, hormones, and other substances that are essential for proper growth and development. Iodine, vitamin A, and iron are the most important in global public health terms. Their deficiency represent a major threat to the health and development of population worldwide, particularly children and pregnant women in low-income countries. Overweight and obesity. Overweight and obesity is when a person is too heavy for his or her height. Abnormal or excessive fat accumulation can impair health. Body mass index (BMI) is an index of weight for height, commonly used in classifying overweight and obesity. It is defined as a person's weight in kilograms divided by the square of his/her height in meters. In adults, overweight is defined as a BMI of 25 or more, whereas obesity is a BMI of 30 or more. Overweight and obesity result from imbalance between energy consumed too much and energy expended too little. Globally, people are consuming foods and drinks that are more energy dense, high in sugars and fats, and engaging in less physical activity. Diet-related non-communicable disease. Diet-related non-communicable disease (NCD) include cardiovascular disease such as heart attacks and stroke, are often linked with high blood pressure. Certain cancer and diabetes, unhealthy diet, and poor nutrition are among the top risk factors for this disease globally. Scope of this problem. In 2014, approximately 462 million adults worldwide were underweight, while 1.9 billion were either overweight or obese. In 2016, an estimated 155 million children under the age of 5 years were suffering from stunting, while 41 million were overweight or obese. Around 45% of deaths among children under 5 years of age are linked to undernutrition. They mostly occur in low and middle income countries. At the same time, in these same countries, rates of childhood overweight and obesity are rising. Who is at risk? Every country in the world is affected by one or more forms of malnutrition. Combating malnutrition in all its forms is one of the greatest global health challenges. Human infants, children, and adolescents are at particular risk of malnutrition. Optimizing nutrition early in life, including 1,000 days from conception to a child's second birthday, ensures the best possible start in life with long-term benefits. Poverty amplifies the risk of and risk from malnutrition. People who are poor are more likely to be affected by different forms of malnutrition. Also, malnutrition increases health care costs, reduces productivity, and slows economic growth, but can perpetuate a cycle of poverty and ill health. The United Nations Decade of Action on Nutrition. On 1 April 2016, the United Nations (UN) General Assembly proclaimed 2016 to 2025 the United Nations Decade of Action on Nutrition. The decade is an unprecedented opportunity for addressing all forms of malnutrition. It set a concrete timeline for implementation of the commitments made at the Second International Conference on Nutrition (ICN2) to meet a set of global nutrition targets and diet-related NCD targets by 2025, as well as relevant targets in the Agenda for Sustainable Development by 2030, in particular Sustainable Development Goals (SDG 2). and hunger achieve food security and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture and SDG-free ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Led by WHO and the Food and Agriculture Organization by the United Nations found the UN Decade of Action on Nutrition called for policies action across six key areas: create, creating sustainable, resilient food systems for healthy diets, providing social protection and nutrition-related education for all, aligning health systems to nutrition needs, and providing universal coverage of essential nutrition intervention, ensuring that trade and investment policies improve nutrition, building safe and supportive environments for nutrition at all ages, and strengthening and promoting nutrition governance and accountability everywhere. Who responds? Who aims for a world free of all forms of malnutrition, where all people achieve health and well-being. According to the 2016 to 2025 Nutrition Strategy, who works with the member states and partners toward universal access to effective nutrition intervention and to healthy diets from sustainable and resilient food systems who use its convening power to have set, ally, and advocate for priorities and policies that move nutrition forward, globally develops evidence-informed guidance based on robust scientific and ethical frameworks, support the adoption of guidance and implementation of effective nutrition actions, and monitors and evaluates policy and program implementation and nutrition outcomes. This work is framed by the Comprehensive Implementation Plan on Maternal, Infant, and Young Child Nutrition, adopted by member states through a World Health Assembly resolution in 2012. Action to end malnutrition are also vital for achieving the diet-related targets of the Global Action for the Prevention and Control of Non-Communicable Disease 2013 to 2020, the Global Strategies for Women's, Children, and Adolescent Health 2016 to 2030, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Mental disorders. Key facts. There are many different mental disorders with different presentations. They are generally characterized by a combination of abnormal thoughts, perceptions, emotions, behavior, and relationship with others. Mental disorders include depression, bipolar disorders, schizophrenia, and other psychos. Dementia and developmental disorder including autism. There are effective strategies for preventing mental disorders such as depression. There are effective treatments for mental disorders and ways to alleviate the suffering caused by them. Access to health care and social service capable of providing treatment and social support is key. The burden of mental disorders continues to grow with significant impacts on health and major social, human rights, and economic consequences in all countries of the world. Depression. Depression is a common mental disorder and one of the main causes of disability worldwide. Globally, an estimated 254 million people are affected by depression. More women are affected than men. Depression is characterized by sadness, not of interest or pleasures, feelings of guilt or low self-worth, disturbed sleep or appetite, tiredness, and poor concentration. People with depression may also have multiple physical complaints with no apparent physical cause. Depression can be long-lasting or recurrent, substantially impairing people's ability to function at work and school and to cope with daily life. And its most severe, depression can lead to suicide. Prevention programs have been shown to reduce depression, both for children, example through protection and psychological support following physical and sexual abuse, and adults, example through psychosocial assistance after disasters and conflicts. There are also effective treatments. Mild to moderate depression can be effectively treated with talking therapies, such as cognitive behavior therapy and psychotherapy. Antidepressants can be an effective form of treatment for moderate to severe depression, but are not the first line of treatment for cases of mild depression. They should not be used for treating depression in children and are not the first line of treatment in adolescents, among whom they should be used with caution. Management of depression should include psychosocial aspects, including identifying the threat factors, such as financial problems, difficulties at work or physical or mental abuse, and sources of support, such as family members and friends. The maintenance or reactivation of social networks and social activity is important. Bipolar disorder. The disorder affects about 45 million people worldwide. It typically consists of both manic and depressive episodes, separated by periods of normal mood. Manic episodes involve elevated or irritable mood, overactivity, rapid speed, inflated self-esteem, and a decreased need for sleep. People who have manic attacks but do not experience depressive episodes are also classified as having bipolar disorder. Effective treatments are available for the treatment of the acute phase of bipolar disorder and the prevention of relapse. There are medicines that stabilize mood. Psychosocial support is an important component of treatment. Schizophrenia and other psychoses. Schizophrenia is a severe mental disorder affecting 20 million people worldwide. Cycles including schizophrenia are characterized by distortions in thinking, perception, emotions, language, sense of self, and behavior. Common psychotic experiences include hallucination, hearing, seeing, or feeling things that are not theirs, and delusions, false beliefs, or suspicions that are firmly held, even when they in evidence to the contrary. The disorder can make it difficult for people affected to work or study normally. Stigma and discrimination can result in a lack of access to health and social service. Furthermore, people with such causes are at high risk of exposure to human rights violations, such as long-term confinement in its institution. Schizophrenia typically begins in late adolescence or early adulthood. Treatment with medicine and psychosocial support is effective. With appropriate treatment and social support, affected people can lead a productive life and be integrated in society. Facilitation of assisted living, supported housing, and reported employment can act as a pace from which people with severe mental disorders, including schizophrenia, can achieve numerous recovery goals, and they often face difficulties in obtaining or retaining a place to live and normal employment. Dementia. Worldwide, approximately 50 million people have dementia. Dementia is usually a chronic or progressive nature in which there is deterioration in cognitive functions. Example, the ability to project thought beyond what might be expected from normal aging. It affects memory, thinking, orientation, comprehension, calculation, learning capacity, language, and judgment. The impairment in cognitive function is commonly accompanied and associated preceded by the deterioration in emotion control, social behavior, or motivation. Dementia is caused by a variety of diseases and injuries that affect the brain, such as Alzheimer's disease or stroke. Though there is no treatment currently available to current dementia or to alter its progressive course, many treatments are in various states of clinical trials. What can be done, however, to support and improve the lives of people with dementia and their carers and families? Developmental disorders, including autism. Developing disorder is an umbrella term covering intellectual disability and pervasive developmental disorders, including autism. Developmental disorders usually have a childhood onset but tend to persist into adulthood, causing impairment or delay in functions related to the central nervous system maturation. They generally follow a steady course rather than the periods of remission and relapses that characterize many mental disorders. Intellectual disability is characterized by impairment of skills across multiple developmental areas such as cognitive functioning and adaptive behavior. Lower intelligence diminishes the ability to adapt to the daily demands of life. Symptoms of pervasive developmental disorders such as autism include impaired social behavior, communication, and language, and a narrow range of interests and activities that are both unique to the individual and are carried out repetitively. Developmental disorder often originate in infancy or early childhood. People with the disorders occasionally display some degree of intellectual disability. Family involvement in care of people with developmental disorder is very important. Knowing what causes affected people, both distress and well-being is an important element of care, as if finding out what environments are most conducive to better learning. Structure to daily routines help prevent unnecessary stress with regular times for eating, playing, learning, being with others, and sleeping. Regular followed by health service of both children and adults with developmental disorders, and their careers need to be in place. The community at large had a role to play in respecting the rights and needs of people with disabilities who is at risk from mental disorders. Determinants of mental health and mental disorder include not only individual attributes such as the ability to manage one's thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and interaction with others, but also social, cultural, economic, political, and environmental factors such as national policies, social protection, standards of living, working conditions, and community support. Stress, genetics, nutrition, perinatal infection, and exposure to environmental hazards are also contributing factors to mental disorders. Health and support. Health system had not adequately responded to the burden of mental disorders. As a consequence, the gap between the need for treatment and its provision is wide all over the world. In low and middle income countries, between 76% and 85%, people with mental disorders receive no treatment for their disorder. A further compounding problem is the poor quality of care for many of those who do receive treatment. In addition to support from healthcare services, people with mental illness require social support and care. They often need help in accessing educational programs which fit their needs and in finding employment and housing which enable them to live and be active in their local communities. Who respond? Who Mental Health Action Plan 2013 to 2020, endorsed by the World Health Assembly in 2013, recognized the essential role of mental health in achieving health for all people. The plan includes formation adjacent, more effective leadership and governance for mental health. The provision of comprehensive, integrated mental health and social care services in community-based settings. The implementation of strategies for promotion and prevention and strengthen information systems, evidence and research. Who Mental Health Gap Action Program launched in 2008, use evidence-based technical guidance, tools, and training packages to enhance service in countries, especially in resource-poor settings. It focuses on a periodized set of conditions, directing capacity building towards non-specialized healthcare providers in an integrated approach that promotes mental health at all levels of care. Mental health and fraud displacement. Key facts: there were an estimated 272 million international migrants in 2019. Refugees, asylum seekers, and irregular migrants are of special concern and need protection and support. Migrants and refugees can be exposed to various stress factors which affect their mental health and well-being before and during their migrations journey and during their settlement and integration. The prevalence of common mental disorders such as depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD) tends to be higher among migrants exposed to adversity and refugees than among host populations. Many migrants and refugees lack access to mental health services or experience periods in accessing these. They also face disruption in continuity of care. the mental health needs of migrants and refugees to be addressed by organizing inclusive and accessible promotion and prevention programs, strengthening mental health as part of general health service, and ensuring timely diagnosis treatment and rehabilitation. Migrants and refugees contribute positively to society, but they cannot reach their full potential unless they are in good physical and mental health. Problems and stressors facing migrants and refugees. Migrants and refugees often face various problems and stressors which can take place at various stages of the migration process. Remigrations, lack of livelihoods and opportunities for education and development, exposure to arms, conflict, violence, poverty, and or persecution. Migration travel and chances, exposure to challenging and life-threatening conditions include violence and detention, and lack of access to service to cover their basic needs. Post-migration, barriers to accessing healthcare and other services to meet their basic needs, as well as poor living conditions, separation from family members and support networks, possibly uncertainty regarding work permits and natural status, asylum application, and in some cases, immigration detention. Integration and settlement, poor living or working conditions, unemployment, assimilation difficulties, challenges to cultural, religious, and gender identities, challenge with obtaining entitlements, changing policy in host countries, racism, and exclusive tension between host population and migrants and refugees, social isolation, and possible deportation. Risk and protective factors for mental health conditions. All of the above-mentioned stressors can increase the risk of developing mental health conditions. For example, unemployment, poor socio-economic conditions, and lack of social integration among migrants and refugees are risk factors for mental health conditions, such as depression. At the same time, these stressors can also exacerbate pre-existing social and mental health problems, factors that negatively impact the mental health and well-being of migrant and refugees children include social and economic deprivation, discrimination, racism, low family cohesion, and frequent school changes. Children who have been separated from migrating parents are at heightened risk of developing depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, conduct disorder, and substance use problems. On the other hand, the impact of stressor can be buffered by protective factors such as access to employment and service, social support, proficiency in the language of the host country, and family unification among resettled refugees. Children protective factors include better socio-economic status, access to education, a perceived sense of safety, contact with family, living and socializing alongside other people of the same ethnic origin, a stable and cohesive family structure, and good parental mental health. Prevalence of the mental health conditions. Many migrants and refugees will experience distress, example feelings of anxiety and sadness, hopelessness, difficult sleeping, fatigue, irritability, anger, or ache and pains. For most people, the action will improve over time. Some studies show that prevalence of common mental disorder, example depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD) is higher among migrants and refugees from among host population. Asylum seekers tend to be elevated risk of suicide. There's also consistent evidence that the incidence of psychosis is higher among migrant populations in a number of countries, and this has been linked with the cumulative effect on social disadvantage before, during, and after migrations. Responding to the mental health needs of migrants and refugees, a comprehensive multidisciplinary and inclusive approach is needed to address the mental health needs of migrants and refugees. Overcoming barriers to receiving mental health care. Addressing barriers to receiving mental health care should include provision of clear information on mental health care entitlements, and how to receive service, example through reception centers, community outreach, schools, religious or cultural settings, outreach to risk groups, example unaccompanied minors, persons with disability, persons who identify with LGBTIQ. Facil- Facilitation of affordable and non-discriminatory access to care regardless of national status, ensuring financial coverage of mental health services and care provided. Facilitators Facilitation of communication, example through engaging interpreter and control mediators, providing person-centered care that is respectful of cultural difference, and facilitating the engagement of multiple sectors and systems, example law enforcement, protection, social service, and education to integrate mental health consideration and support, and ensure referral and access to mental health service, integrating mental health in primary health care. Making mental health care available through general health can help identify migrants and refugees with mental health conditions and can make care more accessible and cost-effective. Examples THÚ MHGAP intervention guides, MHGAP-IG and MHGAP-IG. The delivery of interventions may require adaptation to migrant and refugee population to take into account language and cultural considerations. Intervention provided should be consistent with the national guidelines and policy on mental health of the host country. Ensuring continuity of care. When providing mental health care, an important consideration is related to the length of stay of the migrant or refugees in the host country. The continuity and quality of mental health care of migrants and refugees on the move can be improved by creating international protocols for assuring continuity of care, improving communication among different social and mental health service providers, and providing key written information tailored to their needs that migrants and refugees can take with them, share with different providers. Addressing social determinants and promoting social integration and inclusion. Migrant Migration management policy and provision that have proved to have a negative effect on the mental well-being of migrants. Example, separation of families and children should be avoided. The social integration of migrants and refugees can be facil- facilitated by equal access to employment opportunities and decent work. vocational training, financial support, social protection service, and legal and law enforcement agency, as well as mental health care and psychosocial support. The recognition of skill and qualification acquired pre-migration can also help their integration into the employment sector. Activity and events that promote the social inclusion of migrants and refugees include community forums or peer mentorship programs organized by members of the same refugees or migrant group who are already well integrated into the local community. Special attention is required to support asylum seekers who responds, who is the lead international agency in providing technical advice on mental health, who developed a global action plan 2019 to 2023 to promote the health of migrants and refugees approved by the World Health Assembly in May 2019. The Global Action Plan describes overarching priority and guiding principles to promote the health of migrants and refugees and to contribute to achieving the aim of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, to leave no one behind. The Global Action Plan highlights how the many barriers that migrants and refugees experience in accessing healthcare services can precipitate negative mental health outcomes. The plan recommends priority and options for action by the secretaries in coordination and collaboration with the international organizations for Migration, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees (UNHCR), and other relevant partners. In May 2021, the World Health Assembly endorsed and updated the Comprehensive Mental Health Action Plan 2020 to 2030 with the overall goal to promote mental well-being, prevent mental disorders, provide care, enhance recovery, promote human rights, and reduce the mortality, morbidity, and disability of persons with mental disorder, who is committed with supporting member states in promoting the physical and mental health of migrants and refugees by strengthening healthcare services as appropriate and acceptable of country context and financial situation, and in line with their national priorities and national frameworks and competency, who is also committed to ensuring that essential components are addressed, including the provision of treatment and care for mental and behavioral disorders. In line with global actions, who is operational on mental health in a range of countries and territories that host large numbers of migrants and refugees. They include Bangladesh, Cambodia, Pakistan, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Libya, Pakistan, South Sudan, Turkey, and Uganda, who has close working relationship with other UN partners, including IOM and UNHCR, to meet the mental health needs of migrants and refugees, who co-chairs the Interagency Standing Committee Reference Group on Mental Health and Psychosocial Support in Emergency Settings that provides advice and support to organizations working in emergency and help ensure that the mental health response is coordinated and effective. Emergency situations often cause displacement and may lead to people becoming refugees or internally displaced, whose advice and tools are used by most large international humanitarian organizations active in mental health, who and partners have published a range of practical tools and guidelines to meet the mental health needs of people affected by emergency, including migrants and refugees. Mental health in emergency. Key facts. Almost all people affected by emergency will experience psychological distress, which most people will improve over time. Among most people who have experienced war or other conflict in the previous 10 years, 1 in 5, 22%, will have depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia. People with severe mental disorders are especially vulnerable during emergency and need access to mental health care and other basic needs. International guidelines recommend service at a number of levels from basic service to clinical care and indicate that mental health care needs to be made available immediately for specific Asian mental health problems as part of the health response. Despite their tragic nature and adverse effect on mental health, emergencies have shown to be opportunity to build sustainable mental health systems for all people in need. Types of problems. There are various types of social and mental health problems in any large emergency. Social problems. Pre-existing. Example poverty and discrimination of marginalized groups. Emergency-induced (example family separation), lack of safety, loss of livelihood, disruption, social network and low trust and resources, and humanitarian response-induced (example overcrowding, lack of privacy and undermining of community or traditional support). Mental health problems. Pre-existing example mental disorders like depression, schizophrenia, or harmful use of alcohol. Emergency include example grief, acute stress reactions, harmful use of alcohol and drugs, and depression and anxiety, including post-traumatic stress disorder and humanitarian response induced. Example, anxiety due to a lack of information about food distribution or about how to obtain basic service. Prevalence. Most people affected by emergency will experience distress. Example feelings of anxiety and sadness, hopelessness, difficulty sleeping, fatigue, irritability, or anger, and/or aches and pains. This is normal and will for most people improve over time. However, the prevalence of common mental disorders such as depression and anxiety is expected to more than double in a humanitarian crisis. The burden of mental disorder among conflict-affected populations is extremely high. Who reviews of 129 studies in 39 countries show that among people that have experienced war and other conflict in the previous 10 years, 1 in 5 people, 22%, will have depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia. According to WHO review, the estimated prevalence of mental disorders among conflict-affected populations at any specific point in time. Point prevalence is 13% for mild forms of depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, and 4% for moderate forms of that disorder. The estimated points prevalence for severe disorders, for example, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe depression, severe anxiety, and severe post-traumatic stress disorder is 5%. It is estimated that 1 in 11 people, 9%, living in a setting have been exposed to conflict in the period of 10 years will have a moderate or severe mental disorder. In conflict-affected settings, depression and anxiety increase with age. Depression is more common in women than in men. People with severe mental disorder can be especially vulnerable during after emergency, and they need access to basic needs and clinical care. A review published in 2014 of the Health Information System from 90 refugee camps across 15 low and middle income countries found that 41% of healthcare visits for mental, neurological, and substance use disorder were for 23% for psychotic disorder and 13% for moderate and severe form of depression, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Effective emergency response. WHO endorsed interagency mental health and psychosocial support guidelines for an effective response to emergency recommend service at a number of levels from basic service to clinical care. Clinical care for mental health should be provided by or under the supervision of mental health specialists such as psychiatrists, nurse, psychologists, or psychiatrists. Community self-help and social support should be strengthened, for example by creating or re-establishing community groups in which members solve problems collaboratively and engage in activities such as emergency relief or learning new skills, while ensuring the involvement of people who are vulnerable and marginalized, including people with mental disorders. Psychological first aid offers first-line emotional and practical support to people experiencing acute distress due to a recent event and should be made available by field workers, including health staff, teachers, or trained volunteers. Basic clinical mental health care, covering priority conditions, example depression, psychotic disorders, alcohol and substance abuse, should be provided at every healthcare facility by trained and supervised general health staff. Psychological interventions, example problem-solving intervention, group interpersonal therapy, intervention based on the principle of cognitive behavioral therapy for people impaired by prolonged distress. Distress should be offered by specialists or by trained and supervised community workers in the health and social sector, protecting and promoting the rights of people with severe mental health conditions and psychosocial disabilities is especially critical in humanitarian emergency. It includes visiting, monitoring, and supporting people as psychiatrists, psychiatric facilities and residential homes. Links and referral mechanisms need to be established between mental health specialists, general healthcare providers, community-based support and other services. Example schools, social service, and emergency relief service such as road, though providing food, water, and housing shelter. Looking forward, emergency can build better mental health systems. Mental health is crucial to overall social and economic recovery of individuals, societies, and countries after emergency. Global projects on mental health reform will happen more quickly if during every crisis, efforts are initiated initiated to convert the short-term increase in attention to mental health issues, combined with a surge of aid, into momentum for long-term service development. Many countries have capitalized on emergency situations to build better mental health systems after crises. In the Syrian Arab Republic, despite or perhaps because of the challenge presented by the ongoing conflict, mental health service and psychosocial support are becoming more widely available than ever before. Mental health and psychosocial support is now offered in primary and secondary health and social care facilities through community and women centers and through school-based programs in more than 12 Syrian cities located in governorates severely affected by the conflict. The contrast with the situation before conflict, when mental health care were mainly provided in mental hospitals in Aleppo and Damascus. In Sri Lanka, during the immediate aftermath of the 2004 tsunami, mental health was a key priority. This led to a mental health system reform, supported by WHO, which addressed the shortage of human resources for mental health, such as different cadres of dedicated mental health staff and rezoned 20 of the country's 27 districts now have mental health service infrastructure compared with only 10 before the tsunami. When Typhoon Haiyan devastated devastated the Philippines in 2013, there were only two facilities that provided basic mental health service, and the number of people able to provide support were insufficient to meet the need. A major scale-up of government mental health service and support by WHO and partners have resolved 100% of the Philippines' general health facilities in the affected region now have staff who are trained in the management of mental disorders. Mental health should also be component of national disaster preparedness plans, WHO and the Pan American Health Organization, and supporting countries in the Caribbean sub-region of the Americas so that they will be able to provide adequate mental health and psychosocial support to people in need following hurricanes and other natural disasters. In many humanitarian and conflict settings, access to quality, affordable mental health care is limited. This access can be further diminished due to public health emergencies such as COVID-19, which tend to disrupt service and increase needs further. Who respond? Who is the lead agency in providing technical advice on mental health in emergency situations? In 2022, WHO is operational on mental health in a range of countries and territories affected by large-scale emergencies such as Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Libya, Niger, South Sudan, the Syrian Arab Republic, Turkey, Ukraine, and the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip and Yemen, who co-chair the IASC Reference Group on Mental Health and Psychosocial Support in emergency settings that provide experience support to organizations working in emergency and to country level. MAPSS Technical Working Group in more than 50 countries affected by emergency. The organization works globally to ensure that humanitarian mental health response is both coordinated and effective. The following humanitarian emergency on its board are made to build review mental health service for the long term. Who advice and tools are used by most large international humanitarian organizations active in mental health. Who and partners have published a range of practical tools and guidelines to meet the mental health needs of people affected by emergency.